Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. Nike's stock closed at $83 a share, which is an all-time high for the company. And that's some statement, and it made me think that the markets emit the purest signal, and this surely is a plot twist. It is the record high that says it all. And it means that Nike bet on the right side of history. The best measure of portfolio risk is your ability to sleep at night, indeed. Crypto's 80% plunge is now worse than the dot-com bubble which burst in the year 2000. As I said, November 2017, Bitcoin, wow, what a ride. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. And then January, I said it outright, I am no longer bullish for Bitcoin. In fact, I'm bearish. And I remain so. We're currently, where are we? 6,375. Key levels are between 5,600 and 5,800. But essentially, you see these patterns in these big sell-offs where you get a rebound and you go back down. We've got to break 5.6 to 5.8, which we've kind of bounced off a number of times. But at some point, it's going to capitulate, in my view. Home thoughts: freed from research captivity, chimp brothers separated for treatment. And this is the emotionally charged moment when they are reunited. It's just absolutely exquisitely beautiful. Have a watch. It's only about 10 seconds. First light in the city of Nairobi. This photo is by The Mentalist. Word of the day: blue bory, when the weather is gloomy or stormy, an opening in the clouds through which clear blue sky can be seen. Scots. Metaphorically, therefore, a glimpse of hope, a hint of the imminence of coming change. You can argue with that. And this is a photograph. Good morning from Meru National Park. That photograph was posted by KWS Kenya. Of course, I visited there for the first time this weekend and thoroughly enjoyed myself. It's wild. There are no other cars with you. You're seeing everything by yourself. And there's plenty to see if you know how to look, as our fellow Akiba did. Political reflections: the terrorists in Syria are calling themselves rebels and getting away with it because our leaders are so completely stupid. That was Donald Trump in September 2013. And then Daniel McAdams says, can someone find this person and remind him that he's now in charge of US foreign policy? How Jared Kushner played matchmaker between Israel and Saudi Arabia, according to Woodward. This is Haaretz. Veteran journalist Bob Woodward's new book on the Trump presidency claims Kushner has been working to encourage an alliance between Israel and Saudi Arabia, sometimes against the advice of other senior officials in the White House. According to Woodward's account in the just published Fear, Kushner's efforts began during the first months of the Trump administration in early 2017. Woodward says it was the president's son-in-law and senior advisor who first proposed that the president's first official foreign trip should include two stops, Saudi Arabia and Israel. The idea was to send a message about the US commitment to forging closer relations between the two countries, who are both regional enemies of Iran. Kushner told Harvey he had important and reliable intelligence that the key to Saudi Arabia was the deputy crown prince, the charismatic 31-year-old Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS. The message from them was that Kushner better be careful. The real solid guy was the current Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, who was known as MBN. He was the king's nephew, credited with dismantling Al-Qaeda in the kingdom as the head of the Interior Ministry. Woodward notes that MBS had lunch with Trump in the White House's state dining room, which is usually reserved for meetings between the president and other foreign leaders. This violated protocol, unsettling officials at the State Department and the CIA. Lunch at the White House with the president for a middle-ranked deputy crown prince was just not supposed to be done. And I wrote about this, if you've got a second, in November last year, when I spoke about the capture of a 32-year-old wannabe king. And it described how he was coached into the early hours of the morning by Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, the night before he launched his Night of the Long Knives. So he's very much a Trump asset in my mind. This is going to sound crazy, but just hear me out here. Putin says, turning towards Abe, let's conclude a peace treaty, he says. US fighter jets intercept 2 Russian bombers near Alaska. Putin continues to probe at the fringes. 9th of July, I wrote about tariff wars, who blinks first. I was using the chicky run metaphor. Clearly, over the last 24 hours, the market seemed to think that Trump is beginning to blink. US has asked China for a new round of trade talks led by Mnuchin. Well, that's a significant step up in seniority. The previous meeting was at the assistant secretary level. Trump's aggressive foreign policy remains the signature success of this administration. In my view, it remains highly effective. Trump can keep it up. It's working a treat, I said. So let's have a look at and see how what developments happen here. Eradicating ideological viruses, Human Rights Watch. The training has only one purpose: to learn laws and regulations, to eradicate from the mind thoughts about religious extremism and violent terrorism, and to cure ideological diseases. If the education is not going well, we will continue to provide free education until the students achieve satisfactory results and graduate smoothly. This is the speech by the Chinese Communist Youth League Xinjiang branch in March 2017. In May 2014, China launched its Strike Hard campaign against violent terrorism in Xinjiang. Since then, the number of people formally arrested has leaped threefold compared to the previous 5-year period, according to official figures and estimates by Chinese human rights defenders. The government has held people in pre-trial detention centers and prisons, both of which are formal facilities, and in political education camps which have no basis under Chinese law. Those detained have been denied due process rights and suffered torture and other ill treatment. Interviewees said QR codes like this in this photograph are installed on the walls of their homes in Xinjiang, which allow officials to get instant access to the residents' personal information. That, I'm afraid, is the dystopian future into which all of us are headed, I believe. International markets, as I said, the market is a bit more optimistic that Trump is set to give up a little bit of ground on this tariff war business, and therefore the US dollar index has been coming off. Last time I looked, we were at 94.80. This is a chart from T Commodity, who's actually bearish about the same index. I remain bullish, and I think we're just in a repositioning cycle. Currency markets, let's take a look at that. Euro dollar 116.30. It's not running away at the moment. Dollar index 94.80. Japanese yen 111.43. Swiss franc 0.9698. The pound is at 130.35. The Australian dollar was having a good session. It still is 0.7188. Jobs creation was a big beat. India rupee has recovered a little bit, 71.965, record lows just below 73. This is the emerging market improvement I'm describing. South Korean won 11.1997, that's improved as well. Brazilian real, no, that's at 416.11. Egyptian pound, well, that has barely budged through all this crisis, 17.9095. South African rand, that's bounced quite sharply below 15 to 14.9948. Dollar index, this is a chart from Pinecone Macro. My stop remains at 94. Euro dollar, 3-month chart. I don't feel it's got a lot of energy on the upside, and therefore I would be inclined to sell bounces as the best approach. Commodity markets, Brent crude back at $80 a barrel, and this has actually remained remarkably robust through what has been quite a sharp commodity sell-off. Gold, that's bounced above 1200 again, 1205.50 trading last. But we've actually been, as Lawrence repeated to me when I was doing the podcast with him for EGM, it's actually been ranging, but we're moving up here. I don't think it's going to last. However, if you think that we're going to see a dollar sell-off from here, then it's probably very cheap. Beautiful breakout in sugar. Sugar has been in a steep downtrend for over a decade as the world reduced its sugar intake, and the corporates became increasingly concerned about the sugar quotient and what they were selling. But this is an interesting turnaround, possibly. Emerging markets, quite the close relationship between the S&P 500 and emerging market stocks in recent years, then quite the disconnect in recent months. How long will the divergence persist, asks Jane. This is really, emerging markets is getting a negative feedback loop off China, off the tariff war. Oh dear, Samia Madani, read it for yourself. Erdogan now has taken over the Sovereign Wealth Fund. He's in charge. I wrote about Turkey on the 13th of August, a piece called Cold Turkey. And in that I was saying there's just no way he's going to be able to bend the arc of monetary policy to his will. Pinecone Macro, I just imagine Erdogan on his Bloomberg flipping through weed stock charts, getting ready to make Turkey great again. The Turkish lira is facing its moment of truth as investors await the central bank's rate decision today. Expectations ahead of the Turkish interest rate decision could hardly be higher, and policymakers are mostly themselves to blame for that. Thank for that. Lira touched its strongest level this month, Wednesday, amid speculation that the central bank will follow through on a pledge of action and raise borrowing costs Thursday after inflation surged to a 15-year high. However, the heightened anticipation risks a bigger sell-off in Turkey's markets should officials disappoint markets. And so we've got a big knife-edge day for the Turkish lira. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Juncker, who of course gave Trump a kiss or two and walked away with a very good meeting with him, a noteworthy one, says the EU should offer a free deal to the African continent. The European Union should offer a free trade agreement to the whole of the African continent and a new investment alliance. Jean-Claude Juncker said on Wednesday, among the proposals for EU action to bolster prosperity in the world's poorest continent, the Commission chief in a keynote speech called for a more equal partnership and investment rather than aid. Europeans are currently looking for ways to stem the economic divide, driving Africans to try to migrate northward. Juncker said he had talked with African leaders and was proposing an alliance to boost sustainable investment, which could create up to 10 million jobs in Africa in the next 5 years. And then I like this from Kwabena: everyone has an Africa strategy except Africa. Can Ethiopia's reforms succeed? Foreign affairs. Ethiopia is on the move. The resignation of the beleaguered Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn in February ushered in the most significant reordering of political power in the country since 1991, when youthful guerrillas toppled the long-serving Marxist strongman Mengistu Haile Mariam. And this is what I was saying as well. I said the 90 or so days represent the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison. He'd been Prime Minister for 90 days, crisscrossed the country, ended a state of emergency, released thousands of political prisoners, thawed relations with Eritrea. He said, let's build a wall of love. And he's built it, as you can see. Yesterday they opened, I think, the border crossing. And I think in matters linguistics and language, he's tapped into a Nelson Mandela 1994 mood. And that's why I said he represents the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison. This is an interesting infographic from Carlos Lopez, Trade with Africa, who's up, who's down. Steve Hofmeyr, who's been reaching out to Donald Trump with respect to the white farmers in South Africa, says the murder rates mean nothing to the world if they don't appear as X out of 100,000. The South African murder rate will now be 34 out of 100,000. The world average is still 6, he said. 27th of August, I wrote about the Rand and how it had got caught up in the crossfire. South African all shares down 5.97% year to date. Dollar versus Rand, EM is rebounding. It's lifted the Rand to below 50. Let's see how long that lasts. The Egyptian pound 17.9095. Nigerian all share is down 15.56% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 6.02% year to date. The Bank of Tanzania has rejected a claim of printing $656 million, refuted social media allegations about printing notes valued at 1.5 trillion shillings for the government's use. The central bank informs the public that the statement is incorrect and intends to affect the trust of citizens and international stakeholders on Tanzanian financial stability. The government's overdraft at the central bank will triple to 1.94 trillion shillings in June from 610 billion shillings in May. In April, the amount stood at 1.55 trillion shillings. The government can borrow from the central bank to plug funding shortfalls, provided the amount is capped at 12.5% of the nation's internal revenue from the previous fiscal year, the regulator said. Press release: investigations of banks related to National Youth Service transactions. This is the Central Bank of Kenya, which has bared its fangs. Kenya's central bank fines 5 top banks millions over National Youth Service funds, each of the bank to pay based on amount received from NYS. That's the East African, which is patently nonsense, because it's not a straightforward correlation to the amount received at all. Have a look. So it's very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the banks handle it and to see what they do about it, because, you know, this is just extraordinary. Bags of swag just walked through these banks in this manner. Interesting that Barclays was not counted in that, which informs me that they probably reported these transactions to the Financial Transaction Reporting Center, FATCA or something it's called, I can't remember. And the others obviously didn't. Kenya's debt hits a new peak. Foreign borrowing has outstripped domestic borrowing, with bilateral Chinese loans increasing from just under $1 billion to $5.2 billion in 2017. Really, there is a great deal of concern now. It's a different environment, but policymakers are simply not adjusting, it seems to me, which is not a good thing. Haye, you know, I've been talking about this IMF facility that we have, $1.5 billion. It's like an insurance facility. And there's talk that the government has not made the reforms that are necessary to roll it over. Some comments have been quite intemperate in saying, you know, who needs the guard? But Haye puts it well. He says it is not unreasonable. The absence of a standby facility is an assurance that the country will have the means to convert the tax shillings to dollars, it is not easy to negotiate that clause away. Arguing about it signals that you're unlikely to heed to good fiscal practices. The Chinese company running Kenya's new railway has won an oil terminal deal. China Communications Construction Company won a bid to build an oil terminal that will boost discharge capacity more than tenfold from an existing facility, according to port authorities. Kenya and China signed infrastructure deals last week after bilateral talks between their leaders. Chinese company and the Kenya Ports Authority are yet to sign a contract for the facility, which will be able to store 400,000 metric tons, acting managing director Daniel Manduku said on Wednesday. Treasury on the spot over failure to release 600 million shillings for Lamu jetties. These are existing Lamu jetties and not any new ones. This is for the rehabilitation of key jetties in Lamu County. But takes me to the point about Lapset, and I said Abyei in Ethiopia, which is landlocked, but of course a key future taker of port facilities, has made peace with Afwerki's Eritrea and is surely set to undercut Djibouti and Lapset. Overlay the geopolitics, and it's worth noting that the geopolitics has become much more fluid. Fluidity has been engendered by the spectacular arrival of Prime Minister Abiy in Ethiopia, which is landlocked, of course, but a key future taker of port facilities all along the Horn of Africa. Having made peace with Afwerki, this, I said, is surely set to undercut Djibouti and Lapset, both projects which seem to me to have been predicated to some degree on a permanent freeze between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Investments in ports have a long lead time, and I'm not certain that those same investments are able to recalibrate at the speed with which the geopolitics is moving. The big risk is that some of these port investments will be abandoned. According to Mia Thacker, Kenya Power's share price has plunged from a high of 12 to an all-time low of 5 shillings. It's actually dropped a total of 44.57% year to date. And if you look at it, it's now trading on a price-earnings ratio of 1.344. It's rather alarming, and I'm sure it's busted a lot of loan covenants. Nairobi all shares down 6.57% this year. We're in a bear market now. NSE 20 is down 18.64% year to date. Apparently, UK-based blockchain lender acquires stake in Spirebank Kenya. I just like the photograph of the two fellows from Blockbank, I think it's called. As alleged, bodies of innocent residents killed by anti-stock theft unit near El Ram location of Mandera South Sub-County. Someone was asking about the Al-Qaeda threat, and I said, look, it's asymmetric, it's never going to completely go away, and this is an example of that type of situation, although it's not clear to me what the facts are. Once again, thank you for stopping by.